Hi, Warhawk Defense here. I've got an interesting gun here. This is an SMLE Enfield, and we've done a video on this before. The original gun that we did was an Ishapore made in 1965. It didn't have a very good barrel in it, and so we decided that we would look for another barrel, and we really didn't want to go through all the hassle of, you know, tearing the barrel off the receiver and all that kind of stuff, and I didn't have the tools for it, and so I looked around for a barreled receiver, and I found on Sarco a barreled receiver for a SMLE. It's a No1 Mk Enfield. It was $50, so I ordered it, and when it came in, I was kind of shocked. You know what I got. I figured I'd get something that was off a World War II vintage, or a mid-30s or a 40s vintage gun. But what I got was kind of interesting, and I'm just still a little baffled about it. First of all, we'll give you a look. It is, if you're familiar with the SMLE, you'll know that down the side of the wrist here usually is all the information about the gun. Well, this one is all ground off. The same right up here, this is all ground off as well. Okay, and when I got it and saw that it was all ground off, I thought, wow, that's kind of weird. Now also, this has the magazine cutoff, and the magazine cutoff is that's kind of, I looked that up because I saw that and I thought, wow, that's unusual. Most of the the World War II vintage rifles and even World War I vintage rifles didn't have that. And then I realized that the sight here was the old style sight that corrects for elevation and windage both. So it's got a windage knob right here on the side and elevation. So you can move it up for elevation, and you can turn it side to side for windage. Now when I looked all this up on the internet, of course, and I did some research, and what I found was that the magazine cutoff here was something that went out of vogue early in 1915 or 16. So the 1916 rifles that were being made for World War I did not have that, nor did they have this kind of sight. So these things were details that were cost extra money, of course, to make, and they were making thousands of these for the war, and so they just quit doing it because it was just too costly to do, and they needed guns in a hurry for the war, and so they quit. So now what make is it? Well, fortunately it was a barreled receiver. There was no wood on it. So right under this piece of wood right here, right on the top, right above here, you can't see it, but there's a BSA mark right here. So there's a BSA and a serial number. Now the serial number is in the 2000 range, and there's no prefix. And what I read on all the forums and on the internet was that as these manufacturers began making these rifles, they would start with 0 and start numbering them 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then when they got to the end of the run the next year, they'd put an A in front of it, so it'd be A 1, 2, 3, and then B and C and D and so on as the years progressed. Well, this one has no prefix. This is just a straight number. So that tells me that maybe it was a first year run for BSA, being in the 2000 range. So that would have been 1907. According to the records, BSA started manufacturing these in 1907 and ran, and just ran on from there. But you know, it's kind of interesting that. So I'm thinking it's a 1907 manufacture, BSA. Well, also on the markings, and sometimes they're right here. They're right in here. Of course, a lot of this has been ground, but there is still some very faint markings right in there. And when I got out a flashlight and a magnifying glass, what I found was the stamp VR, and the crown, and the VR stands for Queen Victoria. Well, Queen Victoria died in 1901, and BSA started making the No1 Mark III in 1907. So is this receiver, that made me start to think, is this receiver off of an earlier gun, like an original, Mark III, or whatever the original, I can't remember what the original one was, but made in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And then in 1907 they went to the No1 Mark III model. So was this a receiver off of an original gun, and then BSA took it and barreled it? And there's also some interesting stamps right down in here, and that's supposedly where they stamped the acceptance year that it went into British military service. And it has what looks like a 98, and if you look at it in the sun, you can see it's a 98. So was that receiver accepted into military service in 1898, and when Queen Victoria was still around? And then later, modified, don't know. But anyway, it's pretty cool. We're going to shoot it and see how it shoots. The old Ishapore, and then of course I just took the wood. This wood's off the old Ishapore rifle. And everything matched, all the screws, everything. I mean, it matched perfectly. So I just dropped the barrel receiver in, and we'll see how she does. But interesting. So I don't know, but this is definitely an old. Either way you look at it, it's old because it's got this magazine cutoff, and this magazine cutoff went out of style real early on. The idea was the British generals were afraid that soldiers would go through too much ammo, and they were afraid they'd use up all this ammo. So anyway, here we go. We'll give it a try. Not sure what year it is, somewhere between 1898 and 1907, or certainly before 1915 or 16, because that's when this stopped. Now, that came back in the 1940s. After sometime in around World War II or so, but this I don't think that was the case on this one with the VR stamp and some of the other markings on it. I think this was just a real early gun. So anyway, here we go. We'll give it some shots and see how she goes. Not bad. Sights are down as low as they'll go. About 50 yards out here. It's feeding just fine. Brass looks good. Don't see any problems. Doesn't look like it's really bulged. Primers aren't pushed out. Doesn't look like it's bent out of shape. You know, so we'll go down and take a look. When I got it from Sarco, the barrel was shiny, bright and shiny, and some pretty nice, well-cut, sharp lands and grooves in there. It was a better barrel than the old Ishapore barrel I had on it, even though it was a lot older. But we'll go down and take a look right now at the target and see what it looks like. Whoa! We shot 4 shots and cut the rope right there. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. One down there. Now the one I was just sort of pointing down here, that was probably that one, wasn't really aiming it. But I aimed 3, and there's 1, 2, 3 right there. Now I took that sight and I set it right on the bottom of the ball, right down in here. I think I was setting it right there because I figured it'd go high. A lot of times those are set to go shoot much higher, but as I was setting low, it actually shot a pretty nice little group right there. You know, that's an inch. There's a couple inches there, and since I was shooting here, it shot low. So what I'm going to do is aim right for the bullseye next time. We'll shoot the 3 or 4 more, maybe 5. We'll shoot for the bullseye and see where it goes. And of course I got sights that are both windage and elevation adjustable, but I don't know if I need much windage. They're not too bad, maybe just a touch, but that's not bad for a gun that's more than 100 years old, I guess. Anyway, not bad at all at 50 yards. So we'll mark those and we'll go try some more. All right, here we go. Shooting offhand. Load up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, here we go. 25 yards. All right, offhand, 25 yards. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, you know, not exactly a tight group, but combat accurate for sure. Accurate enough still, since it's made sometime between, I don't know, 1898 and 1907. Maybe 1915, somewhere between there. Not sure exactly where for the most part, because a lot of stuff was scrubbed off, I'm guessing, on a lot of that just from seeing the VR stamp, seeing the 98 stamp, knowing that the BSA made these and started 1907. So anyway, combat accurate enough. Now those two are pretty tight. This one and this one aren't so tight. These aren't so tight, but combat accurate still for a gun that old, and in a barreled receiver from England, and a rifle made in India in 1965. There's the sight. I mentioned that it's got the horizontal adjustment on it right there. It's got the elevation adjustment there, windage right here. And if you pop this sight up a little You know, you can pop it up and adjust it. Ooh, that barrel's hot. Pop it up and adjust it. That's the kind of stuff that they didn't make starting in the 1916 year. During World War I, they quit making that. Here's the magazine cut off right here. This is what the British generals liked. They wanted to be able to push this in, you know, and cut off the magazine so that they weren't able to waste ammo. So they would just push this in, and you know, it's kind of hard to do one-handed, but you know, you move this over, it holds the magazine down. And I did have to modify this stock a little. I had to cut it out a little on the side to get that into fit, since that hasn't been on these guns in a long time. I guess they did put them back on after World War II for a while in some guns, but you can see right there, everything was scrubbed off of that side. There's nothing on the sides. This was all scrubbed. Right down in the corner there, you can see the little bit of the VR stamp. There's a year stamp right in there, and then under here is a BSA mark. This other side was scrubbed as well. You can see that they scrubbed all that off. So pretty well scrubbed clean. It does have the solid magazine bridge, though. That is one way to tell the difference between the very, very early first models like the Metford and Lee Metford and those kind. Like I say, so the rest of this gun is all the old, or the Indian Ishapore, but the barreled action. Now, it did come with the front sight as well. So the front sight was part of it. The barreled action. I got the action barrel, and it had all the sights on it still. Goes up to 2,000. You can see. Anyway, there she is. Kind of a cool gun, very historical. Wish I knew more, wish they hadn't scrubbed it, but if I find out anything else, maybe I'll add it to this video. But anyway, there she is, Lee Enfield SMLE, and this is the original, get this focus going. This is the original SMLE. This is a 1965 stock and some parts, and the very least a 1907 action and barrel, or actually the receiver barrel and sights. So anyway, there she is. Thanks for watching. See you later.